All right. We're trying to experiment with doing some Zoom and recording this Zoom to eventually put on the internet so people would have some video as well as certainly Patty is able to come in today and be with us through this means. Um, I hope you've got a copy of the outlines. They're always, when you come in the building, they're going to be there in the first table with the bulletin and the sermon outlines. I do have articles in the bulletin that go with the sermon this morning. I hope you, of course, we have announcements in there as well. Um, I want to talk to you about, this goes back with our theme of influencing others, reaching others, of instilling faith in our children, which we talked about this morning. But I'm going to be a little broader here today. I'm going to talk about bringing together the generations. I know I'll talk a lot about being 11 years in Auburn, where we had a large student population, and I had to face the truth that I was one of the old geezers there. And here, when you get old, you talk about generations a lot. You talk about things in the past, and obviously you want to look to the future. And we'll talk about how we can, in the church, reach those for the Lord, and how we can bring people together, in different generations, different age groups. It's a great challenge bringing different people together. Now, my lesson I did a few weeks ago on racial prejudice is probably the greater lesson of how do you bring people from other nations and other languages and other cultures. And it's a big challenge. And I will tell you, if we didn't have God's power, we couldn't do it. But I want to tell you, local churches, if we're effective in evangelism, we'll be reaching people from all kinds of backgrounds. We're going to be reaching young and old in different times. And how do you bring them together? How do we accomplish what the Lord prayed for in John 17, where in verse 21, he says that they all may be one as you, Father, are in me and I in you. How do you accomplish that? Well, first off, number one, you got to convert people. I mentioned in my lesson on racial prejudice where people were highly prejudiced because, and I found out later the reason, is that they decided to have a tent meeting and they reached a bunch of people in 1 week. And you know what? They didn't reach those people. They became part of the church and they were quickly baptized, but were not converted. And there was all kinds of trouble. Now, I realize there's a difference between an infant Christian who's converted and weak and somebody who doesn't get it. And so sometimes you can bring people into church and they're not converted. And matter of fact, they could be a generation of Christians. You can raise some children that are not converted. And if you don't have people converted, forget it. We can't work together. Okay. We have to have Christ in common. In Christ alone that we stand. We have to be converted. And if we're converted, then we can work together. But we got to be crucified. And it's interesting because if we don't identify with Christ supremely, then our natural differences can be exploited. It's interesting, the Jew and Gentile, going back to the lesson on racial prejudice. Oh, man, somebody's discriminating against me because of the color of my skin. Somebody's discriminating against me because of my nationality. Man, it doesn't take long to go to war, does it? You think somebody's cheating you? Our natural tendency is, okay, you don't like who I am, I don't like you, and then you get into war. And that's why you have a situation like Galatians 2. It had been instilled in the Jews, you don't associate with Gentiles, and particularly you never, ever, ever, ever eat with them. Now that changed, and Peter knew that was right, but guess what? Peer pressure, for some reason, people came down from Jerusalem, and he was eating with Gentile Christians, and suddenly, here's people coming from Jerusalem. What will they think? And he pulled back. And Paul said, Galatians 2:11, he says, I've gotten Peter's face. And then, and Peter influenced others. Verse 12, for before certain men came from James, he would eat with the Gentiles. But when they came, he withdrew and separated himself, fearing those who were of the circumcision. Fear. But in this case, Peter, you are a Christian. Peter, from your own words, God has accepted the Gentiles. And for whatever reason, Peter's moment of weakness was corrected, and that was good. But why he had that moment of weakness? You see, if you're Christians first, You work things through. You make sure you are Christians. Sometimes divisions come, and the book of John says they went out from us because they were not of us. And some division is absolutely essential because we separate those who are Christians from those who are not. You cannot work with those who are not converted, okay? But those who are converted, we can work through any problem and we can come together, young or old, skin color, education background. There is what I want to talk about today. Could you imagine being in Jerusalem and you are a proselyte, but you're from the Greek background? And here are those who are purebred Jews, and your grandmother's being neglected. Your grandmother's not getting food. These Jews are getting food, but these others, the Hellenists, oh, they're not getting food. Oh, man, could you imagine? South Jerusalem church is about to begin. That's not what happened. While there was a complaint against the Hebrews by the Hellenists, what they did, they solved that problem, and then the church grew. There is what I want to talk about. Brethren, it takes little skill to tear down. It takes a lot of skill to build in a local church. It takes wisdom. So now let's talk about generations, young and old. Let's talk about how the world get people to work together and have one generation's experience combined with the new generation's skills. How do you make that work? Look at 1 John 2, if you would. By the way, reading your Bible would be good. If you have an outline, you can follow along. Of course, they'll be on the screen as well. But in 1 John 2, now, is this dealing with the actual physical age that we have here? Or is it dealing with spiritual age, fathers spiritually? We could go either way as we look at this. But notice 1 John 2:12. I write to you, little children, because your sins are forgiven you for his name's sake. I write to you, fathers, because you have known him who is from the beginning. I write to you, young men, because you've overcome the wicked one. I write to you, little children, because you've known the Father. Notice what's in common here. Whether it is spiritual maturity, guess what? Those who are older ought to be more spiritual mature. We certainly would probably see an age difference in some sense here. But even if it's literal fathers and literal young men, what brings them together in these verses? It's God. It's your relationship with God. It's your knowledge of God. Notice God is found throughout these verses. Verse 14 continues. I've written to you, fathers, because you have known him who is from the beginning. I've written to you, young men, because you are strong and the word of God abides in you and you've overcome the wicked one. There is our strength. And if we don't have that, we don't have anything. And if you're going to try to solve a problem with the generations and we do not have that commitment to God, we are playing a fool's game. So now, let's talk about generations. I guess I love history. I'm the kind of person, I reflect a lot. I guess I have some nostalgia, I'm told. And, I like the past. I like to think about how things have changed and why they changed. That's something I enjoy, okay? And so generations, I think about that a lot. A generation who has experience, they ought to be blessed. It doesn't mean, by the way, if you've experienced stuff and you're older, doesn't mean you are. You may be older and be a fool and not have any wisdom. But we're going to say, for the sake of what ought to be, an older generation ought to know some things that a younger generation needs to hear. Proverbs 20:29, the glory of young men is their strength, and the splendor of old men is their gray head. Now, I like this lesson. They're going to talk a lot about gray head, Mike. We're just going to be a lesson we're going to be excited about here. He's going to talk about gray hair. But you know what? Gray hair doesn't necessarily mean wisdom. It ought to, but it may not. And so again, you could talk about generations that didn't get it. I've oftentimes thought, if we could have seen just one miracle of Jesus, how that would have affected us. But not necessarily so. Think about a generation that saw the Red Sea part. Think about a generation. Anytime you want to get out of your tent, you're either going to see a pillar of fire at night. Could you imagine that? Pillar of fire at night? Looking at that, and that thing moves. Pillar of cloud by day. Could you imagine being at Mount Sinai and hearing the voice of God? You would think that experience for decades, that's going to be a pretty sharp generation, right? They were dumb as rocks. In Hebrews, it talks about that generation. They didn't get it. Job 32:9, great men are not always wise, nor do the aged always understand justice. And so a generation has got to get it. And so again, for those who get it, there's a message to be delivered to the next generation. Again, Hebrews 3, it says, for who having heard rebelled? Indeed, was it not all who came out of Egypt led by Moses? You remember, we talk about the book of John. Hey, this is the prophet. You know what the prophet is? One who was going to be like Moses. It was Jesus. The generation that was led by the most meek man, a great leader. They didn't get it. Whew. Okay, let's make sure that's not us, that we're not hardened. So you got one generation, they were very dumb, and then the next generation led by Joshua, they got it. How does it happen? And how do you get generations to work together? And it was really true. This next generation should have said, you know, my folks missed it, and I understood what they did wrong, and I'm not going to repeat that mistake. I guess you could say, you know, I used to make this joke. I mean, it's a serious statement. Everybody's good for something. If nothing else, you can be a bad example. And in this case, that generation was a bad example. And so notice Judges 2. Here is sort of the core of my whole study, okay? What we're doing this morning. One generation, and then another, and then another. Somebody says life is like a passing train. The train stops at the station. One generation gets off. Another generation gets on. Judges 2:7. So the people served the Lord all the days of Joshua, and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua, who had seen all the great works of the Lord which he had done for Israel. Now Joshua, the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died when he was 110 years old. Verse 10, when all of that generation had been gathered to their fathers, another generation arose after them who did not know the Lord, nor the work which he had done for Israel. You study church history, you see what people call the third generation effect occur over and over and over and over again. You see it in Old Testament, you see it in New Testament, you see it in church history. One of the reasons why you have apostasy in the third generation very commonly is that we don't instill faith in our children. God's people historically have done a very poor job of that. It is a challenging thing. And how do you make it work? When it works, it's great. But how do you make that work? You see, one of the key things here, and again, this is another core truth. You want your children to have a faith that will stand. Teach them to fight for it. If you have a faith that means something to you and you'll fight for it and you're willing to stand for it, then you'll find a person that gets it. The problem sometimes, again, this is not bad, but you know, when you're raised by Christians, there's a lot of things you don't have to face. There are a lot of things you don't have to go through. And there's a lot of things you're protected from. When I became a Christian, I ended up having to leave the background of what my parents taught me. I had to fight some things. I had to make some very scary decisions. And I think that was very helpful to my faith. By the way, when my children were here in Charlottesville, my sons, Stephen and Nathan, they said one of the good things that helped them to come to Charlottesville is that they were different and they had to stand. And they ended up, because they were different, they said it was really good for their faith. So I think my family being here in Charlottesville was a crucial element, at least in establishing and strengthening the faith of my children when they didn't have Christians everywhere. It's interesting, isn't it, how that can work? But you want children to get to the point where they fight for their faith. They understand it. It's not just handed down to them. You want them to make faith their own. You know, the early church, that first generation, Acts 8, you read about those that were converted on Pentecost and why they were converted and the stand they took and the difficulty they faced. Here's what you call a first generation. Here they were persecuted. Guess what happened when you persecute somebody who knows the Lord? As for Saul, he made havoc of the church, entering every house and dragging off men and women, committing them to prison. So what do you do when you persecute the generation of Christians who know the Lord? Well, here's what happens, verse 4. Therefore, those who were scattered went everywhere preaching the word. Satan's learned, you take genuine faith, the worst thing you can do is persecute it. It's like you don't like dandelions and you decide to kick a dandelion. That's a very foolish thing. You'll get a whole bunch more dandelions. But you see, there's where you want to get. You want your children to believe it because they get it. And they'll fight for it. And that's enormously challenging. That's enormously challenging. But it's interesting. 3 generations pass from what you read there in Acts 8 to what you see now later toward the end of Paul's life. Guess what? You got a generation arising. Notice what's happening. Preach the word, be ready in season, out of season, convince, rebuke, exhort with all long suffering and teaching. Now notice what's now happening in the church, verse 3. Where the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but according to their desires, because they have itching ears, they will heap up for themselves teachers. You get a generation that wants it easy. And there's our constant battle. And I want my children to learn how to start over just like we're doing here. I'm glad my children had that experience because there may be places right now, like let's say Alabama, where there's many big churches and so on. In 3 generations, there may be nothing there. And I mean that. That can happen. When I was in Lincoln, Nebraska, helping start a church there, you know, you look at the history of that state. The church was the most rapidly growing religious group in the 1800s there, and then the apostasy came. And it's fascinating to see how in 3 generations things can change dramatically. But if you and I can instill faith in our children and instill faith with those amongst our group, we're going to stand. But we cannot be identified with the mainstream or something else, this concept that wherever the church goes, I go, in terms of some sense of a denominational concept of the church. Generations teach us. Now, let's talk about generations. Yes, I'm one of those old guys that I look at some things going on in dress and other things, and I'm kind of thinking, that's crazy. Now, of course, Mike and I back, I guess, you know, as we think about the 60s and 70s and things like that, and our parents thought we were crazy. And so, yeah, that's part of generation things. Sometimes we will follow our generation. We have shared experiences. There are things, you know, back when I was growing up, we feared nuclear annihilation, the Cold War. That had a big influence in thinking patterns and so on. So every generation's got their own shared experiences. And yet one funny thing is certainly being in Auburn, I used to have sports illustrations I'd use all the time. So let me throw out a name to you. Billy Martin. Now, you know, yeah, he was the angry New York Yankees coach, but I get young people, they look at me like, what? And you know what? Even a shock of shocks. I'd mention the name Bear Bryant. People look at I remember one guy came down he's preached the gospel now full time, but I said, yeah, I'm going to nickname you Bear. And he goes, from who? Bear Bryant. He goes, who's that? I'm going, okay. All right. Generation, you know, I got to update my sports illustration. And so it's interesting how that works. But you see, we go through phases of life. I've not only experienced marriage, but I've experienced children. And I've experienced children leaving the home. And now I have grandchildren. And there's some who've not experienced that or just beginning. And so we have, all of us, we have different phases of life that we're in. And what a college student would be interested in would be very different than what I'm interested in. How do you make it work? How do you take these groups with different needs and make it work in a local church? Let me give you another example. The rebuilding of the temple. Remember how the people of Israel were put in captivity? And by the way, it's fascinating to go in Jerusalem and you see some of the original foundation, and then you see the second temple, and it was destroyed, and the big blocks that are still there. It was fascinating. There's one point we were walking there, and the blocks are there, and there was a Roman road built there, and there was a Roman sign put up on the side. And I told Stephen and Nathan, you know what that Roman sign says? It says, your shekels at work. You know, here is the Roman road. Anyway, I'm sorry. That's just a joke. But it's interesting as you see the temple being rebuilt. Ezra 3. Here's a generation that was there. They've been in captivity. They've never seen the temple. And now it's being built. The older generation remembered the old temple. Notice the two reactions. And they sang responsibly, praising and giving thanks to the Lord, for he is good, for his mercy endures toward Israel. Now notice this. Then all the people shouted the great shout when they praised the Lord, because of the foundation of the Lord's was laid. But notice, but many of the priests, Levites, and heads of the father's houses, old men who had seen the first temple, wept with a loud voice. While the foundation of this temple was laid before their eyes, yet many shouted for joy. Here's two generations. One of them is going, whoa, the temple started. We're going to have the temple back. And the old one, oh, it was much better in my days. Oh, boy, man, yeah, this is nothing. And it's fascinating of how that can happen with generations. It's true today. Yeah, I can tell you about real football teams. So anyway, we can talk about a lot of, there's a lot of things we can talk about. But now let's talk about coming together. It's real simple. How do you get generations to come together? I may ask the same question. How do you instill faith in your children? What you do is you communicate, you connect. We've got to be together. We've got to talk with one another. We have to do things together. In Deuteronomy 32, the exhortation is teach, teach, teach. Understand God, know God, ascribe the greatness of our God. Praise him, know him. Remember, we go back to 1 John 2. There's the key. What is God like? He's a God of truth without injustice. Now you begin to see people. And so here is the key. Verse 6. Do you thus deal with the Lord, O foolish and unwise people? Is he not your father who brought you? Has he not made you and established you? Remember the days of old. Consider the years of many generations. Ask your father, and he will show you. Your elders, and they will tell you. Because you love God, you say, I've got to learn. I don't know everything. And I realize, I understand, I went through the foolish stage as most teenagers do. I've seen some signs in Auburn. Ask a teenager now while he knows everything. And I know there are times when the students come back, there would be announcements on the radio. The immortals have returned, so watch your driving. They don't think, they don't understand that they can die and things can happen. It's very interesting how this works. But when you teach people to know God, guess what you're going to do? You want to ask older people about things. Now, you don't have to. You can be a fool, and you can experience it. And sometimes I used to say with people, well, okay, they're not going to listen. Life will beat it out of them. But sometimes life doesn't beat it out of them because they're fools. And that's why the family is so important. Hopefully you'll listen to your father and listen to your elders. You want to learn how to listen. Listen. He who answers a matter before he hears it, it is a folly and shame to him. It's interesting, while we were in Auburn, when eldership there, we oftentimes, I'd love to give the students, what do you see? What do we need? And there were some things that we did. I remember one time a student came to me and said, let's do a weekend study with just students, led by students, of Book of the Bible. And I was thinking, okay, it sounds good. I didn't think that many people would come. He called me the next day, could we use the building? I was thinking, you don't need the building. Who do you have teach? I said, sure, you can use the building. And I forgot about it. I show up the day that happens by accident, and there were 80 people there, 40 from out of town and 40 from local. And then the next day, there were another 80. And they were supposed to end at 3, and they went to 5. And we got behind it. We ended up having regularly in January 250 college and high school students that come together for a weekend study of the Bible. And how do we know how to do that? Well, we had some students talk to us. We had some students that came from good homes, and we had some leadership. It's fascinating how that works as generations talk to one another. We didn't do everything that people wanted to do, but we listened. It's just kind of like parenting, isn't it? It goes back to that. Martin talked about his dad this morning in class, and I thought about other men. Paul Earnhardt was a man that I remember so vividly. He converted a man in Nigeria, and he ended up coming to America to preach. He had his native tribal scars, and I was working with him in a preacher training arrangement, a 2 preacher arrangement. And Paul would come and hold a meeting for us every year. And I remember Paul sitting and listening to my babbling. And he really listened. I remember taking Paul to my home and doing a Bible study, and he studied with my parents. I've always remembered that. I remember talking to Irvin Lee once, and I recorded it, and it's to my shame that I recorded it. Because I'm hearing Irvin say something, and I'm really wanting to hear him now, and then I interrupt him and I start talking. I'm going, be quiet. But you know what? He listened to me. And I appreciated that. As I've said in parents, let your children want to talk to you. Respect is taught in the home. And a couple of verses talking about the gray hair verses, Mike, here we are. It says, Leviticus 19:32, you shall rise before the gray haired and honor the presence of an old man. In fear your God, I am the Lord. Respect for those who are older. And we've already read Proverbs 20 and 29. Now, let me tell you something about my dad. If you saw any of the pictures on Facebook, he was a leader of men. And he would train men. One of the things he did is he was an elite unit that trained many of the troops to take the beaches at D-Day. He was not the vanguard. Whereas one general wanted his group to be the vanguard. And I'm glad he wasn't, because I probably wouldn't be here today. And the lesson would be shorter. No, but anyway. But it's interesting of how my dad, my generation, we were raised by the World War II generation. And you better believe we heard about authority. Respect for police officers, respect for teachers. You know, I didn't mind getting in trouble with a teacher, but I just didn't want my dad to know about it. And that was the nuclear weapon that, you know, if I rebelled against my mother, she goes, okay, I'm going to let your dad know. And well, that was the way to, okay. But my dad taught me respect. It was drilled in my head. Romans 13, you respect police officers. You respect people in authority. If they do wrong, you don't have to respect that, but you respect their position. Leviticus 19:32, one more time. You shall rise before the gray-haired and honor the presence of an old man and fear your God. I am the Lord. And you see, this type of respect is critical. If we don't teach respect, everything falls apart. And that's why a local church, you've got to teach respect for authority. These churches, they're saying, we're no longer legalistic. Oh, the rules don't matter anymore. You're watching them absolutely fall apart. And you see those groups raise almost none of their children in the way of the Lord. We had people come to us from a church like that. And there's one girl who says, look, all my friends are gone. Respect for authority is at the core of everything. 1 Corinthians 14:37, if anyone thinks himself to be a prophet or spiritual, let him acknowledge that the things that I write to you are the commandments of the Lord. Thus saith the Lord ought to mean something. So now let's talk about discord. Satan likes to split things. Satan likes to take advantages of differences. By the way, you've seen that in the political realm. You've seen it artificially done in this last year. You're seeing every element of deception where you've got manufactured crisis, manufactured anger, a lot of things done. Satan loves to divide. Let me talk to you about Absalom. Absalom was the son of David, and Absalom hated his father. Listen to me here. I understand why. David made an absolute mess with Absalom. I've got a whole lesson on that. I'll teach you, okay? We'll talk about it. But David made terrible mistakes with Absalom. And Absalom, he ended up he was a great critic of his dad. And so Absalom, verse 5, chapter 2 Samuel 52, so Absalom would rise early and stand before the way to the gate. And so it was that whenever anyone had a lawsuit, came to the king for a decision, that Absalom would call out to him and say, "What city are you from?" He would say, "You're serving from such and such tribe of Israel. Listen to this. Here is politics." Now remember, anyone, one more time, anyone. So he goes to anyone. Verse 3, then Absalom would say to him, "Look, your case is good and right." Now, wait just a minute. You're going to anyone. "Oh, you've been hurt. Oh, did they not talk to you? Oh, didn't the king send somebody up there to stand for you? You're being neglected. It's not fair." Notice, anyone. I could see Absalom in one day talking with one side of the lawsuit and talking about the other side of the lawsuit and say they both are good. It's like sometimes we talk about some preachers who are middle of the road preachers. He can preach it round or flat, just whatever he needs to do. And moreover, Absalom would say, "Oh, that I were made judge in the land, and everyone who has any suit or cause would come to me, then I would give him justice." One of the battles we would face in Auburn and even in churches where you have an element, they're just superior. And they know everything. And they criticize the leadership on this, on that, and other. And you know one thing they don't do? They take on no responsibility. If you're not in the firing line, you have no idea what's being faced and why things are being done. You see, how to divide is you start this fellowship with the miserable and you take somebody's hurts and you magnify it. That is how Satan works. How do you handle your hurt, brethren? If you don't handle your hurt right, false teachers, if they would ever come here into this congregation, one of the first things they do, they found people who have unresolved hurts and then they want to take them privately. "Oh, you've been mistreated." And you can do that with generations. You can do that with individuals. Absalom. What was Absalom known for? Because we don't have a class, so you can't speak out. What was Absalom known for? He had hair that was distinctive, didn't he? He wore his hair different than everybody else. He wanted to stand out. But let me tell you what else he was known for. He hated his father, and when he took over, he committed immorality in the most public way. He went on the top of the house, and he committed immorality with the concubines of David. You see, yeah, I know how to do it. Here is the ultimate generational divide. And when Absalom got in charge, he didn't have any wisdom. And him and the men that followed him became dead men. And that's how to destroy a generation. You separate a generation and there's not wisdom. I wished Absalom could have talked to his dad. His dad loved him. His dad made mistakes, but his dad loved him. If Absalom could have talked to his dad, he could have learned some things. But no, he knew everything. And he was unstable in his non-traditional worship, his non-traditional approach destroyed him. As Proverbs 1:7 says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction." When you respect generations, that is found in its root in reverence for God. And that is critical that each generation gets that. Proverbs 19:20, "Listen to counsel and receive instruction that you may be wise in your latter days. There are many plans in a man's heart. Nevertheless, the Lord's counsel, that will stand." And so I would just say, you say, young people, "Man, you don't get it. Yeah, you guys are missing it." Can I say this? Know the Lord and let his counsel move you. There's how you're going to live this life. And it's really important that we can instill that. And so I'm going to talk about a couple of things very quickly, then we'll bring the lesson to a close. Leadership, real briefly. Moses challenged the next generation to do what their parents failed to do. It's kind of interesting. Even though Moses tried to lead one group didn't listen. You can have good leadership in a bad group. I mean, you can have people that don't get it. Notice Numbers 33:51. Here Moses saying, okay, guys, you didn't do what God said. He says, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, why have you crossed the Jordan to the land of Canaan? Then you shall drive out all the inhabitants of the land before you, destroy all their engraved stones, destroy all their molded images, and demolish all of their high places. You shall dispossess the inhabitants of the land and dwell in it, for I've given you the land to possess. First generation, they didn't trust God. He says, what you're going to do, you're going to be who you are because you trust God. Why were they getting this land? Deuteronomy 9:4. Do not think in your heart after the Lord your God has cast them out before you, saying, because of my righteousness the Lord has brought me into to possess this land. But it's because of the wickedness of this nation that the Lord is driving them out from you. That is not because of your righteousness or the uprightness of your heart that you go in to possess the land, but because of the wickedness of these nations that the Lord your God drives out from before you. And that he may fulfill the word which the Lord swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. God was faithful. The next generation got it. Guess what the next generation had to do? They had to fight. Why didn't they just leave the land the moment they came? God wants every generation to fight. You got to believe enough to have motivation enough to go against what you want to do and go up there and make sacrifices and hurt. That's how faith comes. Faith has got to make a sacrifice. It's got to cost you something. Talked about their fathers. Therefore, understand the Lord your God has not given you this good land to possess because of your righteousness, for you are a stiff-necked people. Remember, do not forget how you provoked the Lord your God to wrath in the wilderness. Leadership. I hope you're seeing this, and as I teach, it's not that I'm just trying to speak of faith. Leadership will direct you toward hard things. We're not just going to talk about self-esteem. Oh, you're okay and I'm okay. And grace of God covers everything. And it's all so easy. And you know what? Another generation, young generation, appreciates lessons like this. A lot of people say, oh, you're not going to reach people in Auburn if you preach those kind of lessons. Oh, surprised me. We sure had a lot of it because young people want life to mean something. And sometimes I'm afraid we preach the gospel in such a way where it's almost like there's no challenge. Young people rise to a challenge. They're willing to fight if they have a cause to fight for. Joshua 3. Remember when they crossed the Jordan flood stage? Remember what they were told to do? They were to take rocks and they were to build a monument. Why would they build a monument? Y'all know what a monument is? We're near Washington. We know what a monument is. Do we have monuments? Seriously, in the church. Did you know we've got a monument? Right here. Let's talk about the monument of the rocks. Lord's Supper is a memorial. It's a monument. It's a way to remember. The reason why they built this was not for that current generation. But what they did is they were going to remember this occasion. Notice verse 4. He says, as they were getting ready to cross, there shall be a space between you and it, about 2,000 cubits by measure. Do not come near it, that you may know the way by which you must go. Notice this, for you have not passed this way before. Let me tell you something about why a young generation would love biblical faith. Because you don't know where you're going to end up. When you're fighting for a cause that is valuable, I know when I became a Christian, I had no idea I was going to preach. I love teaching people, and some people suggest that I preach, and I hope I made a good decision. You can debate with me on that, and that's something. But you know what? When you really believe in something, you'll go down paths, and it'll take you places, and people think you're crazy about it. But you know what you do because you're walking by faith. You see, young people don't want a lukewarm faith. God doesn't want it, and they don't like it. I like how Jesus puts it in Luke 9:62. He says, no one having put his hand to the plow and looking back is fit to the kingdom of God. And see, when you got leadership that leads, and we won't, there's so much more we can talk about in time-wise here. I don't want to continue, but leadership will eliminate the distractions and will get people to fight together. Shall your brethren go to war while you sit here? And we'll fight together. That's what a godly leadership will do. Leaders will lead and not be, by the way, let me make one other point. I think I've made it already. But brethren, we should not be afraid of people leaving. Now, I think when you build right and you keep doing that, people are attracted to good teaching and they'll stand. But if you get to the point where you negotiate in the church, oh, you can't say this, somebody's going to leave, you're going to end up watering everything down. And I'll tell you, the first group of people you're going to lose is the early generation, because they see it. It's negotiable. People don't mean it. A biblical faith, leadership. Bring lesson together. How do you bring people together in the church? First off, don't restructure the church for your perceived whims of a younger generation. What the older generation needs, the younger generation is. We need to know the nature of God. We need to have a biblical faith. We need not be afraid to fight. We need to honestly and lovingly communicate. That's what we need. And some people, you don't need to preach on this because this generation, what is it? What's some of the generation names now? I forget the names. That they got different names for different generations. Oh, this generation needs this. And this generation, I don't have to research all that. I give them what God says and I get to know them, and we'll get to know one another and we'll work together. But I cannot tell you why I left the church. And you have people put articles like this. And how do you reach of course, mine was the baby boomers. I remember my generation. But they've got Generation X. Is that one of them? There's all kinds of generations. And so we don't need to restructure the church because of what we perceive somebody. It's easy to split. It's easy to make changes based on the flesh. It's easy to start fussing about one another and develop a non-traditional movement. I'm going to close with just a quick illustration. I remember when we were in Auburn, we had a few, what we call the Fellowship of the Miserable, come amongst our students. And by the way, we never see them stay in the church long term. They never make it. I remember one man got up and this last time we let him do an invitation, but I didn't know his background. His father had gone negative, the church up in North Alabama. And he got up and he talked about Muslims and we should learn from them. We should do this. And we came to realize he was just a bitter guy. And there were some people congratulated him. And I knew these people. As a shepherd, I really tried to follow these people. I didn't know we had a negative group coming up, but they all left the church. And I remember they were praising some things about, there's an article. Did Jesus wear a tie? And what they wanted to say that because you wear a tie or don't wear a tie, you wear a tie, we're requiring everybody to wear ties. I didn't know that. Did you know that, Travis? We didn't require everybody to wear a tie today. And we didn't require that. But see, sometimes because people have a certain way of dressing that showed respect for a certain place, that somehow we created rules. And then they didn't want to resolve this. They did talk with me or others about it. Of course, one thing, when they shared this article, did Jesus wear a tie? I'd come back to them. Did Jesus wear blue jeans? We can turn that around both ways. And we can end up and get into some ridiculous discussion that really is not helping us come together. We could talk about what our dress means and how it can mean in various cultural situations. But see, what was happening here, they were trying to create wedges and separate people. And in some cases, they were successful. I could tell you, I still keep in touch with these brethren and saw what happened to them, the division, the hurt. Then some of them are atheists now. Some are atheists, agnostics, of how that worked. Okay, let's conclude. How do we bring everybody together? We serve God. We have a common faith and love. We put away the wisdom of the world and we put the wisdom of God, and we can work together, any generation, any individual. James 3:17, but the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. Now the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. Brethren, I'm interested in helping people go to heaven. I do not want to be arrogant. I do not want it to make it my way or the highway. But I do know that if we're going to build, there's a way to build. And I pray that every generation, everyone in this church, everyone in the churches they're a part of, that we learn how to work together to build a faith that withstand anything that Satan throws at us. Invitation song, we want to extend that to you this morning. The invitation is the one for every generation. The promise of salvation in Acts 2:38, in verse 39, it says, "For this is to you, to your children, to as many as our Lord God will call." There are promises through every generation. There are things that are true for every generation. If we can assist you in your repentance and being baptized into Christ, we can help you in any way. We urge you to come as we stand and sing.
Let's sing. Come to Jesus, he will save you, though your sins as crimson glow. If you give your heart to Jesus, he will make it white as snow. Come to Jesus, come to Jesus. Come to Jesus, come today. Come to Jesus, come to Jesus. Come to Jesus, come today. Come to Jesus, do not tarry. Enter in at mercy's gate. Oh, delay not till the morrow, lest thy coming be too late. Come to Jesus, come to Jesus, come to Jesus, come today. Come to Jesus, come to Jesus. Come to Jesus, come today. Come to Jesus, dying sinner, other Savior there is none. He will share with you his glory when your pilgrimage is done. Come to Jesus, come to Jesus, come to Jesus, come today. Come to Jesus, come to Jesus, come to Jesus, come today. Let's have a closing prayer and then we will be dismissed.
Let us bow. O holy and righteous Father, we humble ourselves before you and give thanks for this day and this opportunity that we've had to come before you. Lord, we give humble thanks to you for Jesus, thy Son, who died for our sins. And we pray, Father, that we will lead lives that are worthy of his sacrifice. We thank you for this church here in Charlottesville, O Father, and pray that we will be useful servants to do those things that you would have us to do, that we may be built up and glorify your name and teach thy will to others. We thank you, Lord, for today's lesson and the purpose that it brings to us, and pray that we will embrace it, commit it to our hearts, and go forth and do the things that must be done, not only to bring others to the kingdom, but to keep our purpose and focused on what we should do. We're so grateful to you, Lord, for those who labor among us and for our relationship with one another, especially through thy Son, Jesus Christ. And pray, Lord, that you will be merciful and patient with us as we seek to do your will. In all things, Lord, may that will be done. We humble ourselves before you, Father, and offer this prayer through Jesus Christ, thy Son. Amen.
Thank you, Travis, for the good song service.
My pleasure.
Okay, let's see what we got here on our online folks here, how that's going. All right. All right, Patty, are you still with us?
Everybody else. They don't.
Okay, did that go okay?
Lesson. Thank you. A good lesson. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Well, good, good. I'm glad we're making this work. I think Yvette's about to come up and talk to you here. So, here we go.
Hey.
Hey, glad that worked.
It worked good. It worked real well.
Good, good. All right, we'll see you soon.
Hey,